Ambassador Naya Blackwood stood before the massive viewing port of Earth's orbital command station, watching the stars with an expression that betrayed none of the anxiety churning in her chest. At 28, she was the youngest person ever to hold the position of Chief Diplomatic Ambassador, a fact that her critics never let her forget. Today, however, age would be the least of her concerns. "Ambassador," came the crisp voice of Admiral Thorne Voss from behind her. "They're here." Naya turned, her long auburn hair catching the artificial light of the command center. Her emerald eyes, inherited from her Irish grandmother, held a spark of defiance that had served her well in countless negotiations. "How many ships, Admiral?" 50,000, maybe more." Thorne's weathered face was grim. "The entire Zerion battle fleet, from what our sensors can tell. They're holding position just outside the asteroid belt." "And their message?" Communications Officer Zephyr Kane, a young woman with silver-streaked hair and cybernetic implants along her temples, looked up from her console. "It's direct, Ambassador. They're demanding our immediate surrender. The 1,000-year peace. Treaty is officially void." Naya nodded slowly, her mind already working through possibilities. The Zerian Empire had honored the peace treaty for exactly 1,000 years, ever since humanity had first encountered them during our expansion into the outer solar system. Back then, humans had been the younger species, grateful for the advanced. Aliens' willingness to coexist peacefully. The treaty had established clear boundaries. Zerians would not venture past Jupiter, and humans would not expand beyond Neptune. "What else did they say?" Naya asked, settling into her chair at the diplomatic console. Zephyr hesitated. "They claim we've been expanding our territory illegally. Mining operations near Pluto, research stations in the Kuiper Belt. They're calling it a violation of the treaty." "Which is technically correct," Admiral Voss interjected. "We have been pushing boundaries." Naya smiled, and both officers found themselves slightly unnerved by the expression. It wasn't the smile of someone facing imminent destruction. It was the smile of someone who held cards that others didn't even know existed. "Zephyr, open a channel to the Zerian fleet. Full diplomatic protocols." "Ambassador," Thorne said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss our response first." "The Defense Council is. We'll learn about this conversation after I've had it," Naya finished smoothly. "Zephyr, channel open, Ambassador." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of what was undoubtedly the Zerian flagship. The aliens were humanoid, but distinctly otherworldly, with pale blue skin marked by intricate silver patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Their eyes were large and multifaceted, like cut gems, and their movements possessed a fluid grace. That suggested they had evolved in lower gravity than Earth's. The Zerian who stepped forward was clearly their leader. His silver markings were more elaborate than the others, forming complex spirals across his forehead and cheeks. When he spoke, his voice carried the melodic quality typical of his species, but there was steel beneath the music. "I am General Quinn Reyes of the Zerian Imperial Fleet," he announced. "You will identify yourself, human." "Ambassador Naya Blackwood, representing the United Earth Alliance," she replied with perfect diplomatic courtesy. "General Reyes, I believe. There's been a misunderstanding." "There has been no misunderstanding. Your species has violated the Treaty of Non-Expansion. You have 72 hours to evacuate all illegal settlements and submit to Zerian authority, or face the consequences." Behind Naya, she could hear Admiral Voss's sharp intake of breath. 50,000 ships against Earth's defense fleet of barely 3,000. The numbers were not in their favor. But Naya laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh or a nervous one. It was genuine amusement, warm and musical, that seemed to fill the command center. On the view screen, General Reyes's expression shifted from authoritative to confused. "You find our demands amusing, human?" "Oh, General," Naya said, still smiling. "I find your timing amusing. Do you know what day it is?" I fail to see the relevance of your planetary rotations to this matter. Today marks exactly 1,000 years since the signing of the peace treaty. To the day, General, what are the odds that you would choose this precise moment to break a treaty that has served both our peoples so well? General Reyes's multifaceted eyes seemed to narrow. The treaty has served its purpose. The Zarian Empire requires expansion, and your species occupies territory that belongs to us by right of prior discovery. Prior discovery? Naya raised an eyebrow. General, I've studied the historical records very carefully. When the treaty was signed, both our species were confined to their home systems. We discovered the outer solar system together, through exploration, not conquest. The treaty established zones of influence based on mutual agreement, not prior claims. You split hairs, Ambassador. The reality remains. You have violated the agreement, and the Zarian Empire will no longer tolerate your presence in territories. That should be ours. Naya stood and walked closer to the view screen, her movements graceful and unhurried. General, before we discuss violations in territories, perhaps you could explain something to me. Your fleet is impressive. 50,000 ships, all armed for war. But I'm curious about something our sensors have detected. She gestured to Zephyr, who brought up a tactical display on a secondary screen. Your ships are emitting a very specific energy signature, one that we've been monitoring for the past, 6 months now. The same signature we detected when your scout ships began surveying our outer settlements. For the first time, General Reyes looked genuinely surprised. Our reconnaissance was perfectly executed, Naya interrupted smoothly. Invisible to standard sensors, careful to avoid direct contact with our personnel. But General, we've had 1,000 years to study Zarian technology. Your stealth systems work on principles we learned to detect centuries ago. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Admiral Voss leaned forward, suddenly understanding where Naya was leading this conversation. You've been watching us, Naya continued, studying our expansion, our capabilities, our responses. And we've been watching you watch us. Which brings me to my real question. General, if you've been monitoring our activities for months, why did you wait until today, this specific anniversary, to make your demands? General Reyes's expression had grown guarded. The timing is coincidence, is it? Naya's smile turned almost predatory. Because according to our intelligence, there's been significant political upheaval in the Zarian Empire recently. Internal conflicts, power struggles, questions about the current leadership's legitimacy. Some might say that a successful military campaign against a traditional neighbor would be an excellent way to unite a fractured empire behind a common cause. You know nothing of Zarian politics, human, don't I? Naya tilted her head slightly. We know about the 3 competing claimants to the imperial throne. We know about the resource shortages in the outer territories. We know about the growing dissatisfaction with the military's failure to expand Zarian influence for the past 2 centuries. Each statement hit its mark. General Reyes's posture had grown increasingly rigid, and several of the Zarian officers behind him were exchanging glances. Most importantly, Naya continued, her voice softening, we know about Prince Dax Zorian. The reaction was immediate and telling. Every Zarian on the bridge went completely still, and General Reyes's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger or fear. The prince is not your concern, human, isn't he? The rightful heir to the Zarian throne, leading the advance fleet that should be arriving. Naya glanced at her chronometer. ... right about now? As if summoned by her words, Zephyr's console erupted in alerts. Ambassador. New contacts on sensors. 25 ships, Zarian configuration, emerging from behind Jupiter. General Reyes spun toward his own tactical displays, his composure finally cracking. That's impossible. The Princess. Fleet wasn't scheduled to. Incoming transmission, Zephyr announced. It's from the new arrivals. On screen, Naya ordered before Reyes could respond. The display split, showing both Zerion bridges simultaneously. The second ship's commander was younger than General Reyes, with the same pale blue skin but markings. Of deep gold rather than silver. His bearing was different too, less rigid military precision and more natural authority. When he spoke, his voice carried a resonance that seemed to echo in the bones of everyone listening. General Reyes, the newcomer said, you seem to have begun festivities without me. Prince Dax, Reyes replied stiffly. Your early arrival was unexpected. The prince's gaze shifted to Naya, and for a moment she felt something electric pass between them. His eyes were the deep purple of nebulae, flecked with gold that matched his markings. There was intelligence there, and curiosity, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Ambassador Blackwood, I presume? His voice held a warmth that the generals lacked. I am Prince Dax Zorian. I apologize for the dramatic nature of our arrival. Not at all, Your Highness, Naya replied, inclining her head in a gesture of respect. Though I must admit, your timing is impeccable. We were just discussing the historical significance of today's date. Indeed, there was definitely amusement in the princes. Prince Dax Zorian stood in the observation deck of his flagship, the Stellar Harmony, watching the distant blue marble that was Earth through the reinforced transparisteel. His hands, marked with the golden ceremonial tattoos of his bloodline, were clasped behind his back in a pose his tutors had drilled into him since childhood. Yet his mind was far from the imperial composure expected of Zerion royalty. Your Highness, came the familiar voice of his mentor, General Quinn Reyes, not to be confused with his military counterpart leading the main fleet. This Quinn was older, wiser, and had been Dax's closest advisor since his mother's death 15 years ago. The fleet awaits your orders. Dax didn't turn immediately. His reflection in the viewport showed a face that carried the weight of conflicting loyalties. At 32, he was considered young for a Zerion prince, but his purple eyes held the depth of someone who had seen too much political maneuvering and too little genuine peace. Tell me, Quinn, Dax said softly, what did you think of the human? Ambassador? The older Zerion moved to stand beside his prince, his own silver markings catching the starlight. She is formidable, more so than our intelligence suggested. That's not what I meant. Quinn studied his prince's profile. Ah, you mean what did I think of the way you looked at her? Dax finally turned, a rueful smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Am I that transparent? To someone who has watched. You navigate court politics since you were 17? Yes, Your Highness, you are. Quinn's expression grew serious. She is beautiful, intelligent, and clearly skilled at her profession. She is also human, and we are technically at war with her people. Are we? Dax asked, moving away from the viewport to settle into the curved chair that dominated his private chamber. Because from where I stand, this feels more like an elaborate dance orchestrated by the Imperial Council to distract from their own failings. Before Quinn could respond, the chamber doors whispered open to admit another figure. Tecton Vex, the ship's chief strategist, approached with a careful precision that marked all his movements. His markings were copper-colored, indicating his membership in the scholarly caste, and his multifaceted eyes held the sharp intelligence that had made him invaluable to Dax's campaigns. Prince Dax, Tecton said, offering the traditional bow of greeting. I've completed my analysis of the human fleet dispositions. And? They're not positioned defensively, Tecton said, his voice carrying a note of confusion. If they were preparing for an invasion, their ships would be clustered around Earth and Mars, with defensive perimeters at the jump points. Instead, they're spread out in what appears to be an exploration formation. Dax exchanged a glance with Quinn. Go on. Furthermore, our long-range sensors have detected massive construction projects throughout the outer system. Not military installations, but research facilities, terraforming operations, even what appears to be civilian colonies. Your Highness, I don't believe the humans are preparing for war at all. Then, what are they preparing for? Quinn asked. It was Dax who answered, his voice thoughtful. Expansion. Peaceful expansion. They're not violating the treaty out of aggression. They're outgrowing it. Tecton nodded approvingly. Precisely my conclusion, Your Highness. Which raises the question, why does the Imperial Council insist on treating this as a military threat? The three Xerians fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Dax spoke, his voice carrying a weight of inherited responsibility and personal conviction. Because an external threat unites a fractured empire better than internal reforms, he said quietly. My aunt, Empress Vera, faces 3 separate rebellions in the outer territories. The noble houses are questioning her legitimacy. The military hasn't won a significant victory in 2 centuries. A swift conquest of human space would solve a great many political problems. At the cost of breaking a 1,000-year peace, Quinn observed. And potentially starting a war we might not be prepared to finish, Tecton added. The humans have had a millennium to develop their technology in isolation. Their defensive capabilities may be far more advanced than our intelligence suggests. Dax stood and began pacing, a habit he developed during long nights studying military history and political theory. His mother, Princess Lirelai, had been the Empire's most gifted diplomat before her untimely death. She had taught him that true strength came not from the ability to make war, but from the wisdom to avoid it. The ambassador, he said suddenly. Naya Blackwood. What do we know about her beyond the official reports? Tecton consulted his datapad. Youngest person ever appointed to her position. Graduated from their diplomatic academy with highest honors. Speaks 17 languages, including fluent Xerion. Parents were xenobiologists who spent their careers studying interspecies communication. She's unmarried, no children, and according to our cultural analysis, considered quite remarkable by human standards. She speaks Xerion? Dax asked, surprised. Fluently. Also Zentari, Cree, and several other languages of species we've never even encountered. The humans appear to be far more cosmopolitan than we assumed. This information struck Dax with unexpected force. An ambassador who had spent her life preparing for contact with alien species, whose parents had dedicated their careers to understanding. Others, it painted a picture of a civilization that was curious rather than aggressive, expansive rather than conquering. And it made the woman he would meet in a few hours even more intriguing. Your Highness, Quinn said carefully, I must ask, what are your true intentions regarding this meeting with the ambassador? Dax stopped pacing and looked directly at his mentor. I intend to find out whether there's an alternative to the war my aunt seems determined to start. And if the ambassador proves personally appealing? A slow smile spread across Dax's features. Then I suppose I'll discover whether it's possible for a Xerian prince to fall in love with a human diplomat. The admission hung in the air between them. Both Quinn and Tecton understood the implications, political, personal, and potentially revolutionary. Your Highness, Tecton said slowly, such a relationship would be unprecedented. The cultural barriers alone would be overcome by 2 people willing to bridge them, Dax finished. My mother always said that love was the most powerful diplomatic tool in the universe. Perhaps it's time I tested her theory. Quinn moved closer, his expression grave. Dax, I speak now not as your advisor, but as someone who has loved you like a son since you were a boy. The Imperial Council will never accept a human consort. Your aunt would see it as the ultimate betrayal. Then perhaps it's time the Imperial Council learned that the universe is larger than their ambitions, Dax replied firmly. And my aunt might discover that some betrayals are necessary to prevent greater ones. He moved to a cabinet carved from crystallized starlight and withdrew. A small device that pulsed with soft blue energy. It was a personal communicator, encrypted and untraceable, used only for the most sensitive conversations. Tecton, I want you to prepare a full cultural briefing on human customs, particularly their approach to romantic relationships. Quinn, assemble. My personal guard, the ones loyal to me, not to the Imperial Council. We have a diplomatic mission to complete. As his advisors moved to carry out his orders, Dax returned to the viewport. Somewhere out there, Ambassador Naya Blackwood was preparing for their meeting. He wondered if she felt the same electric anticipation that was coursing through his veins, the same sense that they were standing on the precipice of something that could change both their worlds. His communicator chimed softly, and he activated it to find a message from an unexpected source, the ambassador herself, on a secure channel that should have been impossible for humans to access. Prince Dax, her recorded image said, and even through the holographic display, her green eyes seemed to look directly into his soul. I wanted to thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I hope you know that I come seeking peace, not just between our peoples, but perhaps something more personal as well. I look forward to our conversation. The message ended, but Dax found himself staring at the space where her image had been. The fact that she had contacted him directly on a Xerion military frequency demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond what their intelligence had suggested. More importantly, her words suggested that the attraction he had felt during their brief conversation was indeed mutual. Your Highness? Quinn had returned, noting his prince's expression. Is everything all right? Better than all right, Dax said, deactivating the communicator. It appears our ambassador is full of surprises. Is that good or bad? Dax moved toward the chamber that held his formal diplomatic attire, his mind already racing ahead to the meeting that could change everything. I suppose we're about to find out. 2 hours later, as his personal transport prepared to depart for Station Echo 7, Prince Dax Zorian found himself thinking about his mother's final words to him. She had been dying from a rare genetic condition, her body failing, but her mind sharp until the end. The Empire needs leaders who choose love over fear, she had whispered. Promise me, my son, that when the moment comes, you'll have the courage to follow your heart, even if it leads you away from the throne. At the time, he had thought she was speaking metaphorically about compassionate leadership. Now, preparing to meet a human woman who had already captured his aim. Station Echo 7 had been built 50 years ago as a joint research facility, positioned in the neutral zone between human and Xerion territories. Now, as Ambassador Naya Blackwood's shuttle approached its docking bay, the station's abandoned. Corridors held their breath in anticipation of a meeting that could reshape the galaxy. Naya adjusted the midnight blue diplomatic uniform that had been her grandmother's, passed down through generations of women who had believed in the power of words over weapons. Her aide, Myra Solace, a brilliant young woman with short platinum hair and eyes that missed nothing, sat beside her, reviewing the cultural briefings one final time. Remember, Myra said softly, Xerion body language is subtle. Direct eye contact shows respect, but prolonged staring can be interpreted as a challenge. And their concept of personal space is different from ours. They stand closer during formal conversations, but farther apart during casual ones. I remember, Naya replied, though her mind was focused less on diplomatic protocol and more on the memory of purple eyes that had seemed to see straight through her soul. What did our intelligence team discover about the prince's background? More than we expected, Mira admitted. His mother, Princess Lirelei, was known throughout the Xerion Empire as the Peacemaker. She negotiated 17 major treaties before her death. The prince appears to have inherited her diplomatic instincts rather than his family's military traditions. And personally? Myra's expression grew thoughtful. Unmarried, no official romantic entanglements on record. His advisors describe him as thoughtful, intelligent. Some say he's too soft for imperial politics, which might be why he's leading this mission instead of staying safely in the capital. The shuttle shuddered slightly as it docked with the station. Through the viewport, Naya could see another ship, sleek, elegant, with the flowing lines characteristic of Zerion design, already secured to the opposite docking port. "He's here," she murmured. "Naya," Myra said, using her friend's first name in a rare breach of protocol. "Be careful. Whatever happens in there, remember that you're representing all of humanity. And what if humanity's best interests align with my personal ones?" Naya asked, standing and smoothing her uniform. "Then I suppose we'll find out if love really can conquer all." The station's artificial gravity felt different from Earth normal lighter, with a slight rotational pull that suggested Zerion engineering. The corridor lights activated automatically as Naya and her small escort moved deeper into the facility, their footsteps echoing in the metallic silence. They reached the central conference room at the same moment that the opposite doors opened to admit Prince Dax and his party. For a heartbeat, the two groups faced each other across the space that had once hosted scientific collaboration and might now witness the birth of something unprecedented. Prince Dax had chosen formal diplomatic attire, deep purple robes that complemented his skin tone and brought out the gold in his markings. But it was his expression that captured Naya's attention, nervous anticipation mixed with something that looked remarkably like wonder. "Ambassador Blackwood," he said, his voice carrying that musical quality that sent shivers down her spine. "Thank you for accepting this meeting." "Your Highness," she replied, offering the slight bow that Zerion protocol demanded. "The pleasure is entirely mine." Behind Dax stood a tall Zerion with pilot's markings, undoubtedly Jackson Vale, whom intelligence had identified as the prince's most trusted friend. The man's posture was relaxed but alert, and his eyes held the easy confidence of someone accustomed to dangerous situations. "Perhaps," Dax suggested, "we might begin with a tour of the facility? I understand it was once a symbol of cooperation between our peoples." "An excellent idea," Naya agreed. They walked side by side through corridors lined with darkened laboratories and empty observation lounges. The station had been evacuated decades ago when political tensions began to rise, but the bones of its peaceful purpose remained visible in every carefully designed space. "My mother worked here briefly," Dax said as they paused before a vast observation window that offered a stunning view of the asteroid field. She was part of a joint research team studying stellar formations. She always said it was the happiest time of her career. "What happened to her?" Naya asked softly. "Genetic disease. Rare, incurable. She spent her final years trying to negotiate lasting peace agreements, as if she could somehow ensure the Empire's stability before." He trailed off, then looked directly at Naya. "She would have liked you, I think. I wish I could have met her. From what I've read, Princess Lirelei was an extraordinary diplomat." "She was an extraordinary person," Dax corrected. The diplomacy was just one expression of her belief that understanding was always possible between people of goodwill. They had stopped walking, and Naya realized they were standing very closer than diplomatic protocol strictly required. She could see the individual facets of his eyes, like looking into perfectly cut amethysts, and the way his golden markings seemed to pulse faintly with some internal light. "Your Highness," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "may I ask you something personal?" "Dax," he said, "please, and yes. Do you believe in what you're doing here? This war, I mean. Do you believe it's necessary?" His answer was immediate and honest. No, I think it's a tragedy masquerading as policy. But I also think ... He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. I think it brought me to you, and for that alone, I find myself grateful for circumstances I should deplore. The admission hung between them, electric and dangerous. Naya felt her heart racing as she looked up into his face, seeing her own conflicted emotions reflected there. Dax, she said, testing his name on her lips and finding she liked the sound. Of it, what are we doing? I believe, he said, reaching up to gently touch her cheek, we're falling in love. Terribly impractical timing, but there you have it. Before she could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in harsh red, and both their communication devices activated simultaneously. Ambassador, Myra's voice crackled through Naya's earpiece. We've got multiple unknown contacts approaching the station. Fast movers, not broadcasting identification. Jackson's voice reached them at the same time. Your Highness, sensors show 6 ships on intercept course. Configuration unknown, but they're armed and closing fast. Dax and Naya looked at each other, the intimate moment shattered by immediate. Danger. Neither of ours? Naya asked. No, Dax confirmed, his expression grim. Which means someone else knows about this meeting. They ran back toward the docking bay, but as they rounded the final corner, explosions rocked the station. The lights flickered and died, emergency power casting everything in an eerie blue glow. The docking ports! Jackson's voice was urgent. They've damaged both our ships. We're trapped. In the chaos that followed, as the station's hull groaned under the assault from unknown attackers, Naya found herself pressed against Dax in an emergency shelter barely large enough for their combined parties. Their faces were inches apart, and despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, she felt drawn to him with magnetic intensity. If we don't survive this, she whispered, I want you to know that I meant what I said in my message. About wanting something more personal. We're going to survive, he replied firmly, his arms tightening around her as another explosion shook. The station. And when we do, I'm going to tell you that I've been thinking about you since the moment I saw your face on that transmission. Really? Really? In fact, I've been wondering what it would be like to kiss a human diplomat who's brave enough to meet with enemy princes on abandoned space stations. Well, Naya said, surprising herself with her boldness, if you're that curious. She kissed him then, there in the emergency shelter, while unknown enemies tried to kill them all. It was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of crossing a line they could never uncross. But then Dax responded, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like recognition, as if they had been searching for each other across the galaxy without knowing it. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, and not just from the adrenaline of being under attack. Well, Dax said, his voice rough with emotion, that answered that question rather definitively. Your Highness. Tecton Vex's voice reached them through the communication system. I've managed to establish contact with the attacking ships. They're demanding that you and the ambassador surrender yourselves, or they'll destroy the station. Who are they? Naya called back. Unknown configuration, but the communication protocols are Zerian military. Someone from your own people. Prince Dax. Dax's expression darkened. The Imperial Council. They must have been monitoring my communications. Or mine, Naya said grimly. Either way, they don't want these negotiations to succeed. Another explosion, closer this time. The station's artificial gravity flickered, and they found themselves floating briefly before the systems compensated. We need to get out of here, Jackson said, appearing in the shelter's doorway. I might be able to jury-rig one of the ships to fly, but it'll be dangerous. Both ships? Naya asked. No, one, maybe. And even then, it'll only carry half of us. The implication was clear. Someone would have to stay behind. "I'll stay," Dax said immediately.